everyone, I am Dr. Sonal Jain from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. In this series of forensic science lecture, today we are going to discuss about various minutiae characteristics present in the fingerprints, how the fingerprints are being taken from the crime scene and various different methods to develop the fingerprints from the crime scene. When we talk about different minutiae, there are various characteristics like bifurcation, ridge endings, bridges, crossover, etc. The major one is bifurcation. Bifurcation could be of various type. We could have bifurcations where a ridge divides into two, we call it as bifurcation. And if the ridge divides into three, we call it as trifurcation. If there is double bifurcation, that means a bifurcated ridge have another bifurcation, we can call as double bifurcation. And opposed bifurcation, that means a ridge could have bifurcation at the two ends, then we call it as opposed bifurcation. These are the major bifurcations which can be found in the fingerprints as a minutiae characteristics. Then we have ridge endings, where a ridge which is flowing, it stops suddenly, we call it as a ridge ending. Opposed bifurcation ridge ending, where we have two different ridges where they are in the different sides and they end suddenly, then we call it as opposed bifurcation ridge endings. We have island, where there could be two ridge flowing and there is a ridge, small ridge in between. That short ridge is called as an island, and if instead of short ridge there could be a dot, then we call it as a dot. If there is two ridges, they combine together and then they become two, again a single one, we call it as a look, lake or enclosure. If two ridges are flowing and one ridge suddenly start giving another, we call it as hook. Then we have two ridges, if they are connected, we call it as bridge, and if two ridges they form an X shape, we call it as a ridge crossing. These different types of minutiae which are present and can be identified in different fingerprints, they make these fingerprints individualistic in nature. Then Francis Galton has divided the fingerprints into different parts like arch, loop and whorls. Arch is a pattern which has friction ridges that enter on one side of the finger and cross to the other side while raising upward in the middle. They do not have any type lines, deltas or cores. So the simplest fingerprint pattern which we talk about is the arches. The arches can be divided into two parts, the plain arch or the tented arch. When we say the ridges which are flowing, they are entering from one side and they are coming out from the other side, then we call that pattern as the arch pattern. Two types we said about them as the plain, the tented. If there is a rise in the middle, we call that arch as tented arch, but if there is no rise in middle, we call them as a plain arch. Then the pattern which is most common in the population of the world is a loop pattern. So a loop must have one or more ridges entering and exiting from the same side. As we have seen in the arches, they enter from one side and they exit from the other side. But when we talk about the loop, the ridges, they enter from one side, they turn around and they came back from the similar side. Those patterns are known as loop. So depending upon if the loop opening is towards our fingers or towards our thumb, depending upon if it is towards the thumb or it towards the finger, we call it as radial or ulnar loop. If the open is towards the thumb, it is known as the radial loop. If it is towards the pinky or the little finger, we call this as the ulnar loop. So depending upon that, we can classify the loop also into different categories, radial as well as ulnar loop. The third pattern which is common is a whorl pattern. This is a plain or central pocket whorl which has at least one ridge that makes a complete circuit. So if we talk about whorl, it's basically a circular pattern and it make a complete circuit coming from one side, making a whole circle and then going from the other side. So a double loop is made up of two loops. An accidental is a pattern not covered by other categories, and the whorls have at least two deltas and one core. So if we say about the three patterns, arches, loops and whorls. Arches, we do not have any core or delta. Loops, we have one delta, one core, but whorls, we can have at least two deltas and single core. The whorls are further divided into plane, central pocket, double loop, accidental patterns. The accidental patterns is a combination of different types of whorls where we have plane plus central pocket or central pocket plus double loop or plane loop. So, the loop, whorls and arches are the three patterns which are present in the world population. The maximum percentage of people in the world have 65% of loop patterns, 30 to 35% of whorls pattern and 5% are the arches. Arches are the lowest pattern which are found in the world population. The first one you can see is the loop pattern, the second one is the whorl pattern and the third whorl is the arches. So, the Galton has given these terms. He has classified these patterns as the loop, whorls and arches. Whenever we encounter the patterns or the fingerprint at the crime scene, firstly we try to recover the fingerprint from the crime scene. After recovering the fingerprint from the crime scene, if we have multiple prints or sometimes we may have a single print. So, depending upon what kind of print is present, firstly we try to identify the pattern which is present there. Core is the top of the innermost recovering ridge and the center of the pattern is known as the core. The core, through the delta, will look for various different how many ridges are present between the core and the delta. That is also one of the point when we look for to match the fingerprints. So, when we talk about the type lines which are coming and come from the one side and coming out from the other side, these are the diverging ridges that go above and below the loop. Delta is the point of divergence of the type lines. So, basically when we are identifying, we look for a core pattern, we look for a delta pattern and we draw a line between the core and delta. We see how many type lines are there and then we look for what are the different kind of patterns which are present there. So, it is quite sometimes gets difficult to match a fingerprint from the crime scene because the fingerprint which is left at the crime scene is accidental or by chance. So, you might not have a full fingerprint of a person who was present at the crime scene. We have to look for or the match the fingerprint using that partial print only. It is not like that the criminal will leave a whole palm print or whole rolled impression at the crime scene. The prints which are left behind, they are accidental in nature. It might be from the corner of your fingers. That is also one of the major reasons we take rolled impressions because that cover most of our fingers with the fingerprint. So, the patterns which are found at the crime scene, they might be not in good condition, they might not be full impressions, they might be just a little part of any finger out of the 10 fingers. So, a fingerprint examiner should be quite careful while collecting the fingerprint from the crime scene. The procedure of the fingerprint collection is quite tough. Firstly, the location of the fingerprint we should look for. After that, we should look for how to collect that fingerprint. And the third most important thing is the matching if a partial print is obtained from the crime scene. Nowadays, we have different software systems where the fingerprint can be easily quantified and can be matched and the quality of the print also can be improved using various softwares. So, when a loop pattern is present, we can say the one or more ridges entering and exiting from the same side and the loop pattern have delta. So, we have discussed that the radial are the loops which open towards the thumb and the ulnar are the loops which open towards the pinky. Now, the question, they are known as the radial and ulnar because of the bone which is present in our hand. We have radius bone and the ulnar bone. So, the radius bone is towards the thumb. So, the loops which are opening towards the thumb, they are known as radial loop and the loops which are opening towards the little finger, they are known as the ulnar loops. So, arches are the most patterns which are found in only the 5% of the population. Then we have whorls. For the whorls, we should have type lines and minimum of 2 deltas. A whorl pattern is classified as a whorl pattern when 2 deltas are present over there. We have plain whorls, we have central pocket whorls, double loop whorls and accidental whorls. The plain and central pocket loop, they both have at least one ridge that makes a complete circle. The line drawn between the 2 deltas touches a spiral ridge. So, we can see that when we say we take the plain or central pocket loop type whorl pattern, if we see the middle pattern and if we draw a line below the deltas, it will touch the spiral ridge. In the central pocket loop, the line drawn between the 2 delta does not touch a spiral ridge. So, both the patterns, they have at least one spiral ridge that makes a complete circle, but in the plain pattern it touches it, as you can see in this image that the red line is touching, but in the central pocket loop the red line is not touching the complete circuit. So, double loop, when we have 2 loops combined in S shaped, then we call it as a double loop. So, in the double loop we have 2 cores and 2 deltas, but mostly in the plain loop and the central pocket loop we have 1 core and 2 deltas. An accidental pattern is when we have 2 or more patterns together, but it does not include the plain arch. That is just the type lines which are flowing from the left side to the right side. The ridges, they do not have any type lines, delta or cores. They enter on one side and cross to the other side while rising upward in the middle. If they have certain rise in between, we call them as tented arches, and if they do not have any rise in between, we call them as plain arches. So, the arches can be further of 2 types, the plain and the tented, and this can be easily classified. So, we can see opening towards the thumb, we have the radial loop, and the opening towards our the pinky finger is called the ulnar loop. So, depending upon you can look at the fingerprints of your hand and you can see towards which side your loop is opening or closing, and you can easily identify that the loop is a ulnar loop or a radial loop. But we have to be very careful looking at the fingers, but at the patterns which are present, because the mirror image will come on the patterns which is being taken on the Henry classification scheme. So, the classification scheme, it uses the all 10 fingers as we have seen previously in the photograph, and based on the identifying features of the pattern of each fingers, around 1024 labels are created. This system is still used, but nowadays when we have the partial prints present on the crime scene, we look for the various softwares to improve the quality of the fingerprints and to match those fingerprints. In fact, nowadays, different police stations, they have the fingerprint collection system over there. If any offender is being captured by the police, the fingerprint is directly taken, and that machine within few minutes can tell whether he is a repeated offender or a first time offender, because we have the records, and those records, they are with the fingerprint bureau, and that directly matches. If he will give print on that biometrics, it will match within few minutes and will tell that this person is this person if it is a repeated offender, and we have the data available for this particular person. So, whenever a new suspect is there or a new criminal is there, his fingerprint record is taken into the system and it will remain there, which can help us in matching further. So, the fingerprint record which is being classified by the Henry classification system is filed under its label, and we have to locate a record. Only 1 out of 1024th of the entire collection must be examined. They have made it in a particular way. For example, we have to look for which fingers have whorl pattern. So, each finger has given a point value. If you have a right hand and if you have a whorl pattern on the finger, the pinky finger, you will get 4 points. Depending upon the ring finger, middle finger or the index finger, the points are 8, 8, 16, 16. But for the left hand, the points will be for the thumb 4, index finger 2, middle finger 2 and the little and the ring finger 1 each. So, depending upon these points, depending upon where you have whorl, you will get these points, and the other fingers which do not have any whorl, you will have a number 0 assigned to that. So, we will take the right index to right thumb in the numerator, and in the denominator we will take left index to the left thumb. After that, we will get with a number with the numerator and the denominator. That number is written on the file of the person, and which helps us in knowing that unique code that this person's fingerprint value is 18 by 10, which will help us in knowing that a person could have whorls on these particular fingers, which helps us in the identification. And this number which is written on the file, then we do not have to look for, if we have the suspect fingerprints, we can calculate the Henry value for that and we can match or identify. So, comparison in the previous times, the fingerprints, they were being compared using the hand magnifying glass. This comparison of fingerprints also nowadays also very few people use this method. Nowadays the direct matching is done using various softwares, but this remains the gold standards. Certain times when there is a certain legal requirement on the number of points required for a match, which is not given by the court of law but by the fingerprint experts, they compare around 8 to 12 points for the matching of fingerprints for a complete fingerprint. But when we talk about the partial print, depending upon case to case, when we do not have enough number of minutiae to match with cases, there are certain cases which are being investigated and being solved, in fact using as low as 5 points. When we talk about these points are nothing else but the minutiae which we have studied before. They could be bifurcations, they could be any hook, spur, lake, enclosure, etc. So, the prints which you found at the crime scene, they might not be visible at all the time, because the fingerprints which are being found at the crime scene, they are left because of the sweating and they are invisible. That is why they are called as the latent prints or the latent fingerprints. These latent fingerprints are those that are not visible to the naked eye. This consists of the natural secretions of human skin, and for the prints visibility we require certain development solution so that they could be visible. So, the latent prints, how the prints are being left at the crime scene. So, a criminal or offender who is visiting a crime scene, there are certain sweat glands which are present on the pores of our fingers. If we see, these sweat glands releases sweat, and when a criminal or offender will touch anything on the crime scene, his or her fingerprint will be transferred to that particular place. For example, for opening any safe, for opening the door, for opening any window, which can be avoided by using gloves. So, the secretions will not then be transferred, but if the criminal is barehanded, then the prints can be transferred. The secretions usually come from 3 glands: eccrine, which secretes largely water, both inorganic components and organic components. These are most important for fingerprints. The organic components which are present in the fingerprints are the amino acids and the lactic acids. These amino acids which are present in the fingerprints, they can be present until various years. For example, in a case, the fingerprint which was found on the crime scene after 10 years was also developed by the fingerprints expert. So, how does that fingerprint stayed there for 10 years? Because of the various organic secretions which were present in the fingerprint. There were certain amino acids which were present, and that helped us in the development of that fingerprint which was very old. There are certain pheromones and organic materials which are secreted from the apocrine gland, and the sebaceous gland secretes the fatty or greasy substances. So, the most important things which are present there are the organic glands which are being submitted through the eccrine glands in the fingerprints. So, when we have to develop, let's imagine a case where the fingerprints are being found at the crime scene. So, whenever any case is reported to the police station, the forensic expert team will reach the crime scene. The first and foremost thing is to look for the evidences. Whenever at a crime scene the team is being reached, they look for the evidence very carefully and meticulously. Certain evidences are visible to us. For example, if there is any blood, if there is any weapon which is present there, dead body which is present there, but certain evidences, they are not visible to the direct naked eye. This is with the intelligence of the investigating officer that he has to look for those latent prints. Apart from the latent fingerprints, there could be certain other prints also which are present at the crime scene. But now we are talking about the latent fingerprints. There are certain technological developments which have happened and it helps the forensic investigating officer to look for those latent prints present at the crime scene. For example, there are certain UV torches available. RUVIS is a method which helps us in the identification of the latent prints present at the crime scene. We have various lasers and alternative light sources which helps us in viewing the latent fingerprints, which were first used by FBI in 1978. So, the first and foremost point is the location. After locating the print, we have to develop the print. After developing, we have to photograph. After photographing the print, we have to pick up the print and take it to the forensic science lab for further analysis. So, for the location, we go for the various alternative light sources, we go for the various UV visible torches, we go for the RUVIS. After we have made sure, the investigating officer have made sure that these are the particular places where the fingerprints are present. For example, they are present on the side of the table, they are present on a glass which the offender has used to drink water. So, depending upon different surfaces, what is the color of the surface, what is the texture of the surface, the investigating officer or the fingerprint expert will develop the print from that different surface. We have various powders. These powders are the very common and the very cheap method to develop fingerprints from various different surfaces. For example, if the surface is white, let's talk about a white surface. Always use a contrast powder to develop a print from the white surface. A black powder will be used. If the surface is black, we can use a grey powder or a white powder. But if the surface is multicolored in nature, then we have to go for the fluorescent powders. These powders, they adhere to both water and fatty deposits, and always use a contrast to develop the print. Then we have certain chemical methods, silver nitride, which reacts with the chloride to form silver chloride, and the material that turns grey when exposed to light. Apart from silver nitrate method, we have ninhydrin, silver nitrate, cyanoacrylate. So, ninhydrin, it reacts with the amino acids to produce a purple color. So, when we were talking about the eccrine gland and it secretes the amino acid, the ninhydrin method is the one which reacts with the amino acids to produce a purple color. And the amino acids, they are stable in nature, so they will remain till many years. So, as we have discussed that a case has been solved where the fingerprints were as old as 10 years and the ninhydrin method was used to develop fingerprint over that particular surface. The silver nitrate method, as we discussed, it reacts with chloride and forms silver chloride. Cyanoacrylate is another method which fumes and reacts with water and other fingerprint constitutes to form a hard and whitish deposit. So, depending upon what kind of method is present there, what kind of surface is present there, we use different method. For hard non-porous surface, we use powders. For glass, mirrors, metals, we use different powders. We adhere to water and fatty deposit in prints. We use black for light surfaces, use grey for dark surfaces, silver chloride for various chemical. For very old prints, we use ninhydrin method, and those methods can be difficult, it takes time to develop prints using those methods. It might take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we can heat up to a certain level so that to speed up the process. But we should have be very careful using that, because we cannot lose our evidence, which is very precious, found at the crime scene. The most important method which is used nowadays is cyanoacrylate glue. Apart from fingerprints, we have certain other evidences which can be found at the crime scene: footprints, ear prints, retina, bite marks. And nowadays for the biometrics, the retina scans are being used, bite marks and the lip prints, apart from the fingerprints which are found at the crime scene, and they can also be developed using various powder methods or other methods. So, in conclusion, I will say the fingerprints is the most versatile evidence which is found at the crime scene, but for the evidence which is being collected, we must use different procedures to identify this particular evidence, for matching of this particular evidence, and it should be properly matched so that we can reach at a conclusive evidence. Thank you.